both natural resources and emerging environmental policies. And this panel will explore how these practices reveal the complex ways in which organized crime reshapes our relationship with the environment. Today we will have four, I hope. We have at this moment three, but we are waiting for one speaker to join us. We have four presenters, and I will present them in the order of presentations. So we have Andrei Anisimov, we will have Eduardo Xavier Barros, we will have Rafael Mazzoni, and we will have Benjamin Mukoro. And this is a very international session from Siberia to Brazil to Nigeria. So we will start immediately with the first presenter. I will give 15 minutes to each presenter, so we will have enough time for discussions. And I would like to encourage you to put your questions also in Q&A. So Andrei Anisimov, we will talk now about mentality, mindset, and environment, organized crime, an example of East Siberia. Andrei, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me introduce and let me start the presentation. Yep. Okay.
And Andrei, please be close to your microphone. Thank you.
Can you see?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. This study we made with my colleague Roman Zabavko. He's absent today, but it's okay. I will describe all of that. This is just only key points of my presentation. Let's jump in it. Okay. Well, what about Eastern Siberia? Eastern Siberia is a region of Russia that occupies more than 40% of the country's total territory. This is indeed an immense expanse, 7.2 million square kilometers. Most of this territory is inhabited and covered by forest. Okay. An ecosystem of such magnitude inevitably influences environmental processes on a global scale. At the same time, environmental degradation and pollution due to human activity represent a long-standing and steadily worsening problem. Naturally, such harmful human behavior requires an appropriate governmental and societal response. One of the most significant instruments of such response is the application of criminal law measures. However, the criminal law response to the threat described above currently faces a number of objective difficulties. One moment. Objective difficulties. The principal difficulty lies in the fact that criminal law developed in an era with fundamentally different social and economic structures, and it still tends to view environmental threats primarily as a technical or economical issues rather than as a fully fledged form of social danger. We agree with some authors who argue that criminal law requires a substantial revision in light of the objectively existing global environment and threat. At the same time, we believe that such approach overlooks another component that is crucial for practical change: the mentality, mindset, and methodology of society related to the environmental crime. There is also another side that make use of popular myths and beliefs for its own purposes. It's organized crime. In this context, we define culture as the ensemble of values, attitudes, beliefs, and associated behavioral practices that develop other historical and economic processes. In our view, culture in this sense is influenced by two fundamental circumstances. The first one is factors, and the second one is myths. The first usually products the second. What about methodology? This study, we use official data from the Information and Analytical Center of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of registered environmental crimes. court judgments from the Irkutsk region, sentencing statistics from the Judicial Department of the Supreme Court of Russia. Also, we use, of course, surveys 125 local respondents and 56 law enforcement and judicial personnel involved in combating environmental crimes, such as investigators, inquiry officers, and specialists in economic security and anti-corruption. I will highlight some key negative factors and related myths with these factors and try to describe it. The first one. Oh my God. What about? Okay, factor number one and factor number two. The first factor is moral obsolescence of Russian environmental criminal law. Russian environmental criminal law, shaped by the Romano-Germanic legal tradition and legal positivism, exhibits several structural deficiencies that weaken the environmental legal culture of local communities. The system faces two core problems. The first one is the state-centered criminalization. Environmental offenses are defined exclusively by state discretion, often without regard for local ecological realities, leading many residents to view such prohibitions and unjust or disconnected from actual environment needs. The second one is excessive formalism. Only conduct explicitly codified as criminal is treated as such. Harmful behavior not formally defined in law are excluded from criminal liability even when they contradict public perception of justice or environmental protection. The second factor is imperfect criminal policy within the existing criminal law framework. We argue against further toughening criminal policy through custodial sentences, emphasizing instead the priority of property-based and restrictive sanctions, for example, substantial fines, bans on specific activities, etc. Despite the formally severe statutory penalties for environmental crimes, which may carry from 7 till 9 years of imprisonment, in practice fewer than 10% of offenders receive custodial sentences. Other measures, including activity bans and restrictions on freedom, are rarely applied. That's why we can describe two related myths. The first one, environmental crime punishment doesn't justice and serious. We should ignore it as well as we can, as it's like a criminal thing about it. A sympathetic attitude toward the criminal subculture in general and deeply skeptical view of the fairness of ecological criminal law. Okay. The next one. We're skating on the very thin ice, if you caught my drift. But the third factor, as we see, is misconstrued understanding of Orthodox Christian culture condensed of Christian culture. Building on Weber's analysis of Protestant ethics, we can see how certain distorted cultural interpretations of Orthodox Christianity, rather than religion itself, shape contemporary attitudes toward the environment in Russia. While only about 2% of Russians identify as a Protestant, an estimated 60% identify with Orthodoxy, which, despite formal separation from the state, but Orthodox Christian strongly influences everyday consciences. The authors do not challenge individuals' right to religious belief. Instead, we just highlight negative cultural perceptions historically associated with Orthodox tradition, some of which originate in the early modern period and continue to justify environmentally negligent behavior today. Three elements are especially significant, as we see. The first one, environment as a divine trial, a culturally distorted orthodox ethic portrays nature as a God's given test, where suffering and subjugation of a hostile environment contribute to spiritual salvation. This worldview prioritizes the afterlife over early well-being, discouraging active efforts to improve environmental conditions. The second one, suspicious of material well-being and private property. This tradition promotes skepticism toward wealth, ownership, and entrepreneurial activity, reinforcing broader societal problems surrounding private property and weakening incentives for environmental stewardship. The third one, primacy of the faith over the law. A cultural hierarchy places faith above legal norms, meaning laws, especially environmental laws, are seen as relative obligations that may be legitimately disregarded in service of perceived higher spiritual principles. That's why we can describe three myths. The first one, environmental issues are less priority in comparison with afterlife existence. The second one, a good attitude to the man who doesn't demonstrate, as less is best, his opulence. The third one, xenophobic sentiments. Of course, is a commonplace in the bulk of cultures, but Orthodox especially reinforces it in case of strangers. The next one. Factor number 4, peripheral nature of the Eastern Siberia economy. Key characteristics, there are two key characteristics. The first one, perceived temporary residence. Due to its remoteness, Eastern Siberia is often seen as a place of compelled or temporary residence, reducing incentives for long-term environmental care. The second one, high migratory intentions, supervised by the All Russian Public Opinion Research Center, it's called FTIOM, indicate that in small towns and rural settlements, approximately 40% of residents migrate for education or work primarily to Western regions or abroad, with only 16% returning and roughly 1 in 4 Russians overall considering relocation to major cities. This combination of resource dependence, revenue centralization, and population mobility reinforces environmentally negligent practices and limits local engagement with sustainable development. That's why we can describe another two myths. The first one, is Siberia's temporary living place doesn't worth to mitigate ecology consequences here. The second one, looking at an opportunity for leave the region is a good idea. Now we can describe how local mentality is used by international organized crime. Eastern Siberia is proximity to China, and abundant natural resources attract Chinese organized crime groups engaged in illegal resource extraction and poaching of wild animals and plants. These groups are characterized by long-term systematic operations and extreme secrecy, often facilitated by cultivating strategic social relations with the local population. As a result, some local develop neutral or even positive attitudes toward their criminal activities. Key strategies include the first, integration with local communities. Crime groups exploit local xenophobia and recruit residents for operational roles recruit residents, form businesses relations with local entrepreneurs, and sometimes engage in intermarriage while retaining control over financial and logistical aspects. The second one, criminal culture assimilation. They aim to integrate with Russian organized crime networks, adopting local criminal norms, worldviews, and practices to gain trust and legitimacy. The second one, alignment with distorted Orthodox values. The distorted understanding of Orthodox Christian culture described earlier aligns remarkably well with the mythology of the Chinese triads, which traditionally emphasize demonstrative asceticism at times reaching the point of absurdity. This feature bears certain similarities of irrational religious practices. Members of the triad almost never wear expensive clothing, suits, or accessories. Frequently, the higher a triad member stands within the criminal hierarchy. The simpler and often poorer his appearance becomes at times resembling that of an impoverished person. This is often perceived positively by the local population. The next one, hostage-based management. Recruitment methods exploit residents' desire to leave the region using promises of educational or business opportunities abroad to coerce compliance through family leverage. The next one, exploitation of legal and policy weaknesses. Awareness of lenient environmental criminal sanctions allows organized crime to involve locals in illegal activities such as logging, poaching, knowing that penalties are often minimal. This combination of cultural and another culture insights, social manipulation, and exploitation of legal gaps enables international criminal groups to operate efficiently while minimizing local resistance. But
Andrei, can you please conclude? Because
okay, okay, okay. Um, mm, we have to admit that this at least one positive myth. It's Lake Baikal. It's a very interesting place because it's um, uh, factor of interest to Lake Baikal is based on middle class existing. Middle class related the positive myth. Lake Baikal is a symbol of environmental purity and quality. This lake is sacred. That's why it needs to be defended. We are looking an opportunity. We are looking for an opportunity for live. I'm sorry. Conclusion, and I will finish. Okay. In our view, the first one, culture, mentality, and mythology directly influence human behavior, including criminal behavior. At the same time, this aspect of human activity remains relatively underexplored in criminology. The second one, organized crime directly exploits the mentality and mythology of the population in the territories where it operates, often deliberately reinforcing certain myths and beliefs. The third one, despite all contradictions, there exists a public demand on the religion in the region for ecological well-being and safety. Consequently, we study of the types, nature, and magnitude of ecological harm, as well as the development and strengthening of mechanisms to counter ecological crime, hold significant potential and is urgently needed. This is not hopeless, although it will require effort and time. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm sorry for the long time.
okay, thank you very much, Andrei. We are moving now to our second speaker, Eduardo Xavier Barros, and the title will be Amazon Organized Crime, Indigenous People, Activities and Innovation of Operation Katrimani. Eduardo, the floor is yours. Please unmute yourself also.
Just a minute. I'm putting the presentation. I'm sharing the presentation. Just a minute.
we still cannot see it, so maybe some assistance, and perhaps you can start without it. Okay. Eduardo, if you don't mind, we are going then first to the third speaker, and we will come back to you afterwards. Is it okay?
Okay, no problem.
Okay, and our third speaker is Rafael Mazzoni, and his presentation will be about the relationship between organized crime and illicit gold market. Rafael, please unmute yourself, and the floor is yours. And we already see it.
All right, can you all hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you again for the opportunity to be here. I'll be talking about a research we've been doing with the Observatory for Public Safety in Minas Gerais, which is my state. And we have been working with crime related to gold. And I'll be showing you guys a few insights about both extraction and also the whole stolen market for the stolen good market for gold. So my study goals will be first to map and to categorize police records related to gold, which is a challenge because of the way the forms were built, the police record forms. I'll be also profiling victims and offenders, especially victims, because we don't have a lot of data on offenders for this crime. We also investigated links between offenders in order to assess if they are really organized or not. And we also try to understand both urban and environmental dimensions of these phenomena. So I think it's important to highlight where Minas Gerais is and how big it is for Brazil. Minas Gerais is really in the middle of Brazilian territory, pretty close to both São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. And it has the second biggest population in Brazil, with over 21 million people. And it also has almost 900 municipalities. And they all range from dense centers to small towns. And it's a very diverse geography and a very complex cities network. It is really important to highlight that because it's a big challenge in terms of public safety, especially because we have different biomes all over the state, showing in this map. And we also have boundaries with a lot of other Brazilian states, and all of them have their own police forces and very different contexts. So in terms of our review, we start thinking about gold as a craved good, which means that gold is very has a high value. It is really interesting for offenders to have it because it's really easy to resell, and plus it's also really difficult to track or even to assess if it's legal or not. We also found some really interesting studies associating, for example, pawn shoppings to gold theft and robbery, and also studies associating the gold price with gold theft. We also found some evidence in South Africa about gold and platinum theft, which shows involvement of sophisticated organized crime groups and also challenges in identifying and arresting traffickers. In terms of Brazil, we only find links to criminal organizations, especially in a very specific context of criminal governance, of especially in small areas, in small towns of the country. And we also found a big gap in terms of our state, because we do have we do have a lot of evidence about Amazon in general, especially with all the mining operations and the protected areas, and also the indigenous lands. But Minas Gerais is the largest producer, the largest gold producers in Brazil, and it's very well known for it. Even the name Minas Gerais comes from the centrality of gold mining in the country. So it is a gap to better understand what it means in terms of Minas Gerais. So the data source that we used is a data lake produced by Minas Gerais state, which has data from all the police corps in the state. But we didn't find, we don't have a specific field for gold related materials. So we needed to try different search methods to find these specific crime records. And then after we found them, we start to assess the quantitative analysis of the records, including some correlation tests. Also, we did a qualitative analysis of these incidents, reading the narratives that the police gives to these occurrences. We also used a graph analysis of offenders and also geospatial analysis of the phenomenon. And now I will start by the illegal extraction front. So we did find an increase in the rates over time, especially this year, 2025, which is like double the average we found for the last year. But there's also another thing that is interesting. So as you guys can see, through April to September, we find the highest average of illegal extraction, which is associated with Brazilian winter. And also, it is easier for people to get to the rivers during the winter, because they're a little dry. So it is easier to find gold during this time of the year. And now, talking about geospatial analysis, we found some evidence that gold extraction is really concentrated in the state, and it's concentrated in a very specific area, which is it's called Quadrilátero Ferrífero, and it's very well known for the concentration of mining due to geological conditions. So it is not like a random thing, but it's very concentrated in this area. And another evidence that we found is that the amount of extraction is really associated with the gold price. So in yellow, we have the gold price, the international gold price. And we see that every time it increases, it also increases the number of of extraction records, which is in blue. And we did find an interesting thing, that it takes 3 months to the market, to the extraction market, to adjust to an increase of gold price, which can be associated with all the organized crime thing. Now, talking about both theft and robbery, gold theft and gold robbery. What we find is a little different from the extraction, because we see a decrease in both theft and robbery. When we talk about theft, we are mostly talking about burglaries, like house burglary. So an offender gets inside of a home and finds gold, especially during weekdays in the afternoon, when houses are mostly empty because people are in their routines. And robbery is very associated with firearm and in public areas, especially in streets, especially at night, and especially on Fridays, which is also due to the active routines of victims, because they tend to go out and go to bars and restaurants during the night on Fridays, and probably they lack surveillance during this time. Now we try to link the offenders, and here we didn't find big evidence of organized crime, because just a few of the offenders are somehow related to each others. I know this graph isn't big enough for you guys to see, but it shows how each one of the offenders link to other ones. And just a few of them, these ones in red, are somehow related to others, and just a really few amount of them are really related to each other in more than 1 or 2 offenses. So it looks like a very it is not very organized, I would say. And now, since we're trying to see the whole picture, we need to talk about the stolen gold fencing. So we didn't find much evidence about it, especially because we only found 43 gold fencing incidents that were reported to the police during the last 6 years. So it is necessary to think ahead, to think about other sources of data. And in this map, we show the red points. They are where the incidents, the stolen gold fencing incidents are, and in gray, we have the density of business that are somehow related to gold in Belo Horizonte downtown, which is capital of Minas Gerais state. So we do find some evidence of the concentration of these incidents close to areas where we have more business related to gold, especially to resellers and pawn shops. Now, trying to put everything together, we find some evidence of the involvement of organized groups in illegal gold extraction. And also these crimes, they are more sensitive to economic fluctuations, such as changes in gold prices. as we saw in that graph. But when we think about theft and robbery, we have few indications of organized groups or even of planned actions. It seems more like an opportunity crime than organized crime, especially when we look the whole picture of the state, because the state is very big. It has almost 900 cities with different, they range from big urban areas to small towns, small rural towns. And also the offenders appear not to be specialized on gold. And when we talk about fencing, we find even fewer incidents, but they are highly concentrated in the downtown area of the state capital, which is also very well known for the gold market. It is funny because if you go walking by downtown, you see a lot of people on the streets with little cards showing I buy gold, come talk to me, or something like that. So it is easy to know where they are, and we do need to do something about it. And now for the next steps, we still are deepening the analysis, especially the qualitative part. And also we are trying to deepen the incident narrative analysis. So with it, this is all, and I thank you guys for the time and attention, and I'll be open for questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rafael. We will keep the questions until the end of this session. And we are going now back to Eduardo. Eduardo, please, the floor is yours now.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. My name is Eduardo. I'm a Brazilian Army officer and a master's student in public security. And today I will share a field-based perspective on the intersection between organized crime, logistics, and indigenous protection in the Amazon, using the case of the Operation Catrimani in the Yanomami territory. This talk is grounded on more than 15 years of experience in the Amazon, working with intelligence, interagency, operation, and border missions, and on recent work assessing Catrimani directly in the field. Please, the slide 2. To understand Catrimani, we need to start with a simple but fundamental idea. The Amazon is not just a forest, it's a logical system. Over the last decade, illegal gold mining in the Yanomami indigenous territory evolved into a logistics-based criminal ecosystem. It involves financier, clandestine airstrips, irregular aircraft, fuel and mercury supply chains, and coordinated river and air mobility. For indigenous communities, this has meant violence, disease, food insecurity, and the degradation of their territory. For the state, it represents a direct challenge to sovereignty, to the rule of law, and to the environment, protecting one of the most remote borders regions of the Brazil. So, this Operation Catrimani emerges as a state-led, multi-agency response, not only to attack illegal mines, but to disrupt the logistics that sustain them. Please, the next slide. So this is not a single one-off operation. It is carried in successive phases, revisiting the same areas and gradually increasing state presence and control. There are 5 main lines of effort. First, the area denial, systematically destroying clandestine airstrips that connect mining cities to urban centers. Second, service denial, seizing or neutralizing aircraft, fuel, and mercury, so that the business model of illegal mining becomes more risky and more expensive. Third, permanent state presence included the creation of a new border special platoon inside the Yanomami territory to avoid the security vacuum that often follows operations. Fourth, multi-domain action, coordinating air, land, and river access, helicopter, patrol boats, and ground troops working together. And fifth, integrated intelligence, combining traditional military intelligence with OSINT and geospatial monitoring to prioritize areas and measure impact. So it is a campaign with a clear design. The next one, please. One of the key innovations of the operation is how the operation is evaluated. Instead of relying on vague statements like security has improved, the campaign uses a rapid and auditable framework based on a set of practical indicators. These indicators include, for example, the number of clandestine airstrikes neutralized, the number of aircraft destroyed or seized, the volume of fuel and mercury intercepted, the number of days without illicit signals in each area of interest, and the estimated time and cost for criminal groups to rebuild their infrastructure. We also look at the territorial reach of state presence, the level of interagency coordination, the humanitarian effects for indigenous communities, and the degree of public transparency in reporting results. All of this is summarized in a one-page dashboard, designed to be fast, comparable across different hotspots, and resistant to the political distortion. Next slide, please. So, key operational results. What did Catramani actually achieve when measured through this lens? Throughout 2023 and 2024, integrated federal operations in the Yanomami territory, including Operation Catramani, have neutralized approximately 60 clandestine airstrikes, destroyed or seized nearly 40 aircraft used to support the mining logistics, destroyed more than 120,000 liters of fuel, and, according to official federal assessment, helped drive a 98% reduction in illegal mining areas inside the Yanomami territory. In parallel, the installation of a new border special platoon and regular riverine patrols established a form of continuous state presence that simply did not exist before. For indigenous communities, this has translated into safer access for health teams, more predictable delivery of food and medicine, and a visible reduction in criminal activity near some villages. The next one, please. From my perspective, working on the assessment side, there are 5 key lessons from Catramani. First, campaign logic matters. Instead of one big, media-driven operation followed by silence, Catramani works in cycles, revisit sensitive areas, and track indicators over time. Second, auditable metrics change the conversation. When you have concrete numbers and clear indicators, it becomes easier to identify what is working, where gaps remain, and how to adjust the campaign. Third, genuine civil-military coordination is essential. The operation only works when environmental agencies, police, health service, and armed forces share information and align their priorities on the ground. Fourth, the combination of OSINT and GWINT, from satellite imagery to open source flight tracking and social media, significantly improves the detection of newer stripes, routes, and actors. And finally, permanent state presence inside the territory acts as a form of logistical deterrence. It increases the cost, the risk, and the uncertainty for criminal networks trying to re-enter these areas. Next one, please. Beyond the Yanomami case, Catrimani offers at least three broader strategic implications for the Amazon. First one, it provides a replicable architecture for other logistics-dependent hotspots, places where crime relies heavily on river and air corridors. Second, it shows that secured operations can be designed around indigenous protection, rather than treating indigenous communities as collateral or as an afterthought. The territory and the people are part of the center of the gravity. Third, it suggests a model of campaign-style governance in which multiple agents share a common campaign plan, work with measurable outputs, and are held accountable for results instead of running disconnected initiatives. So this is not only a question of more resources, it's also a question of how we govern complex operations in sensitive territories. The next slide, please. Based on these findings, there are a few directions that I believe are especially important. First, to scale up continuous geospatial and OSINT monitoring. Second, to develop predictive models of reoccupation. Third, to strengthen financial investigations, tracking the money behind illegal mining, including aircraft owners, fuel suppliers, and illicit gold traders. Fourth, to adopt the rapid auditable assessment model as a standard requirement for major interagency campaign in the Amazon. And finally, to integrate indigenous-centered early warning mechanisms so that indigenous organizations and communities can signal pressure and risk before it escalates into a full-blown crisis. The next one. In conclusion, Operation Catrimani is still ongoing. It is not perfect and it does not solve all the challenges in the Yanomami territory, but it demonstrates that coordination, data-driven, community-focused campaign can produce real effects, even in some of the most remote areas of the Amazon. If there's one idea I would like to leave with you, it is: state presence is not measured only by number of troops deployed on a map, but by our ability to protect the people who live where almost no one else can reach. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Eduardo, and perfectly on time. And then we are going now to our last but not least speaker, Benjamin Mukoro, who will talk about models on exploitation in the green transit and on the example of carbon market. Please, Benjamin, your floor.
Yes, thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on your time zone. So please give me a few minutes to.
Can you please come closer? Can you please come closer to your microphone? Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, can you also see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So, the title of my name is Benjamin Mukoro. My background is in law and policy, based in Nigeria, and I'm going to speak on organized models of exploitation in the green transition, carbon markets in view. So the study is, the purpose of the study is to highlight carbon fraud as an emergent form of organized crime. And it's exploratory in nature and uses the case study methodology. So for a start, we look at the imperative for the green transition. And a lot of us would agree that there is global consensus on the need for a transition away from fossil fuels to more sustainable energy sources. And this consensus has been built around the United Nations Framework Convention and the protocols, the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement more recently. And based on this multilateral framework, a lot of mitigation and adaptation strategies have emerged, energy efficiency, low carbon pathways, renewable energy solutions, and sustainable agriculture, a whole lot. And notably in this context, RED Plus, which has to do with reducing emissions through reduction in deforestation and all that. Now, carbon markets have been identified as a way to incentivize climate action, which basically means that emissions are discouraged by placing a price on carbon and a limit on emissions so that entities that have to emit beyond the limits would have to buy carbon credits to offset their emissions. So yes, there is a whole lot of buzz about carbon markets, and we have two basic kinds of carbon markets: the compliance market and the voluntary market. The compliance market, as the word compliance implies, is based on a mandatory statutory requirement to comply to limit carbon emissions. So in jurisdictions where you have a limit on emissions, if you are going to comply with those statutory limits and still be able to emit, then you have to go to a compliance market to buy carbon credits. But then there are other entities that operate in jurisdictions with no statutory mandate to limit emissions, but they do want to limit their emissions as responsible corporate citizens. So they voluntarily do that, and they sell their carbon credits in the voluntary market. But I must mention that the voluntary market is more controversial as the carbon credits are more susceptible to fraud. So yes, so carbon markets can be national, can be at the national level. I know in the US, the state of California has some sort of carbon cap and trade system, and the EU also has a cap and trade system. And then you could also have an international carbon trading system based on multilateral frameworks. So Article 6 of the Paris Agreement has actually given an impetus to the development of a global carbon market. Now, having said that, there are emergent ethical and criminal challenges in carbon markets. There are issues with climate justice, transparency, and accountability, and these issues are interwoven as they reinforce each other. The lack of climate justice encourages environmental crimes, encourages projects that actually not have a criminal element. So as we'll see through the different case studies that I would highlight in my presentation. So, but before I do that, we can, this is just a snapshot of the more common types of frauds or crimes you get to see in carbon projects. Of course, you see a lot of bribery, just to, skip required due diligence. Some corporates engage in this kind of collusion with public authorities, especially in projects that are situated in the global south. And this leads definitely to the issue of land grabbing, where land is taken from indigenous people to, implement carbon projects. And then there is no community ownership. So, and then very related to the carbon credit, there is false accounting and greenwashing, which basically means, you're claiming to generate more carbon credits than are actually generated from the project. Now, some of the most vulnerable carbon projects, like I mentioned, REDD+ is a very is a common culprit. Then you also have large-scale industrial gas projects. These are projects that aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, industrial greenhouse gas emissions, whether in the oil and gas or other industrial sectors. And then you have the old methodology project. What this means is that the methodology for verifying carbon credits has evolved over time from the methodology that was used under the Kyoto Protocol to the methodology under the Paris Agreement. So the methodology under the Kyoto Protocol is not as stringent, not as foolproof as the methodology under the Paris Agreement. So most of the old methodology, a good number, I wouldn't say most, a good number of the old methodology projects were bad for transparency, and they were more susceptible to fraud. So moving on. So what makes REDD+ projects vulnerable? There is difficulty in monitoring, reporting, and verifying projects reliably. Human rights crimes are also frequently associated with REDD+ because of the physical nature of the project. You have to, it's related, it's very site specific, meaning that it's something that you have to acquire land to do. So it affects, usually intersects with the rights of indigenous landowners. So where right violations are not built on national legal regimes, that's the land system of land tenure, they may emanate from corrupt bureaucracies which allow project developers to circumvent local interests. This is what I mentioned before. So there is also poor compensation of host communities due to power and informational asymmetries, and several other forms of non-inclusivity. Now, for large industrial gas projects, vulnerability generally arises from the difficulty in actually estimating the amounts of the baseline emissions from these industries. And then, because you need a baseline to estimate, okay, this is how much emissions we are saving and all that. So it's a whole complicated process, and it's very easy for false accounting to be done in those circumstances. So I already explained the point about the old difference between the old methodology and the new methodology. The old methodology, for instance, focused exclusively on developing countries. So it kind of reinforced green capitalism, and there was an element of coloniality in the old methodology. And it also did not contain mandatory adjustments to prevent double counting, and had little to no requirement for SDG compliance and benefit at both the host country and project developer levels. So fortunately, old methodology projects are required to transition to Article 6 methodologies by the end of 2025. So that's just around the corner. Now, we're moving on to some case studies where we, just to demonstrate how vulnerable carbon projects can be to fraud. Yes. So the first case study we'll look at here is the Kariba Forest project in Zimbabwe, which was, championed by a company called South Pole. And it claimed it safeguarded a forest comparable in size to Puerto Rico. At the end of the day, it was found that most of the carbon credits, were not real, and the local communities did not benefit as they promised. So, so there was a suggestion, initial suggestion, that 52 million tons of carbon emission. Okay, the initial estimate of 52 million tons of carbon emission was inflated to 197 million tons. So that's more than double the amount that it was supposed to be. And in addition to that, there was no inclusiveness in this project. Time will fail me to go into the details, so I'm just going to skim over the details. Most of the 100 million euros from the company from the project ended up with South Pole and its partner companies, not to the people and rural communities. Now, in case you wonder why the people have to benefit from REDD+ projects, these projects, like I mentioned before, are based in communities, and it involves, acquiring land from the people, which is no longer available to them for agriculture and other purposes. So they are highly invested in these projects, and ordinarily they should benefit. So you also have the cases in Brazil. Several REDD+ projects have been implemented in Portel, which is a part of the Amazon rainforest. The projects, a number of projects, I'm not going to mention them by name here. They were carried out over areas forming part of indigenous communities and legally under state control. And the projects are said to have been carried out without proper studies and stakeholder engagement. The projects are situated in state forest areas which require approvals. Also, locals were deceived by misrepresenting the legal import of documents from the environmental register, and they have not been compensated. So that's another case study. And very famously, we have the case of Beijing Carbon, which is a Chinese company that helped German companies in supposed emissions reduction projects in China. The German government designed its carbon scheme to incentivize companies needing to reduce their emissions to channel funds to projects abroad, not just projects in Germany. Only new projects were eligible for the scheme. That is, but the reason for this is that in climate action, there has to be additionality. That which means that the climate action, for it to be able to use to get carbon credit, it must be something that wouldn't have been done ordinarily if that project was not implemented. So under this German scheme, only new projects were eligible for the scheme. Unfortunately, pre-existing projects were in fact approved. Now, the whole point here is that when false accounting happens, it's a loss to the economy. It's an overall loss, it's an economic loss, because you're paying for something that would have been done anyway. It's a loss to the climate economy. Funds that should have been channeled to additional climate action are now channeled, which is what additionality means, are now channeled to already existing projects or projects that would have been done anyway, irrespective of this project. So in this Beijing carbon case, a letter by insiders of the Chinese carbon market sent to Germany's Environment Agency accused the project's auditors of having colluded with Beijing carbon. Why do I emphasize this? To show that carbon fraud is not just something that happens randomly. It is an imagined form of organized crime. It is organized, it is persistent, it is not something that happens once in a while. It is carried out by organized actors, and it's transborder in nature. So it's something worth looking at. So just to reemphasize what I said, we just look at a definition of organized crime proposed by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, that organized crime is a continuing criminal enterprise that rationally works to profit from illicit activities that are often in great public demand, just like carbon credits are in public demand right now. Its continuing existence is maintained through corruption of public officials and the use of intimidation, threat, or force to protect its operations. So,
Benjamin, can you please conclude? The time is out.
Okay. So just looking at best practices for carbon fraud prevention and detection, we need, first of all, to recognize carbon market fraud as a form of organized crime, which is the purpose of this paper. Like I mentioned earlier, it is exploratory in nature, and that would ensure that regulators and law enforcement subject carbon projects to the requisite amount of scrutiny. And we also need a better understanding of the nature of the actors, which means we need to map out the landscape of the carbon market and also map out the actors in organized carbon fraud. And there needs to be interagency cooperation across borders and mainstreaming and enforcement of transparency and accountability standards. And lastly, the use of modern technology for progressive monitoring and evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Thank you all for the presentations. We have now 10 minutes for discussion. And there is one question from the audience, and I think it is for Eduardo. The question is, how difficult is to get the crime properly acknowledged when ecocide has taken place on or catastrophic effects? How should ecological crimes should be codified to support your work?
Thank you for the question, but it's basically three major ideas about this. In the ground, we see a single criminal ecosystem. So, but the legal system still breaks it in small, isolated offenses, which hides the real scale and gravity of the problem. So, because of this fragmentation, the true ecocide impact on rivers, forests, and indigenous peoples is not fully acknowledged as one serious crime. So, to support the operation like capture money in Amazon forest or Amazon region, ecological crimes should be codified as ecocide. This with a clear definition, and this could aggravate factors for indigenous lands and explicit link this to organized crime. So in the ground we see one thing, but the legal system it doesn't follow in the velocity with the things are occurring in the ground. It's basically these three ideas.
Thank you, Eduardo. There is another question to Benjamin. Do traditional criminal actors like organized crime groups work with corrupt companies and government officials? No, we cannot hear you. Until you are back, I do myself have some questions, but I see there are more questions here. No, my question is to Rafael.
Sorry, I lost you for a bit.
Okay, so you're back. Thank you. Then I will read it again. Do traditional criminal actors like organized crime groups work with corrupt companies and government officials?
Okay, yes. The answer to that question is a straight yes, because in certain instances, they recruit these companies that have Red Plus projects. They recruit local accomplices to intimidate people that stand as an opposition to this. We've seen this in. I'm from Nigeria, so this is not just something that started. It's a kind of transition between the oil and gas industry and the new emergent Red Plus project. This was a pattern that was evident, I think, not just in Nigeria, but much of the global south in the oil industry, where multinational companies use local agents, not just the government, to perpetrate their environmental crime. So it's a continuing phenomenon. So it's also continuing into Red Plus projects. Like I said, time will fail me to really go into the details, but this has been proven, and it's part of it.
And maybe to continue with this, I think it's the same person, but I'm not sure about it. What do we do if seemingly legitimate actors in carbon markets are same perpetrators of carbon fraud? Does this then complicate our ability to tackle criminality? Can you answer this?
Yes, yeah. Okay, so that's the big problem. Most of the carbon fraud cases that have come up involve legitimate companies. At times, they would say that they would try to escape liability by saying that, oh, we went through a third party auditor. So I think the easiest way to deal with this, like I mentioned in my presentation, is to mainstream accountability standards. And just to add, most of these projects have fraud cases have been associated with a voluntary carbon market. So what we need to do is to make the standards more stringent, and then to set up monitoring framework to ensure that these standards are enforced. And it's also there's also a prediction, a future outlook that with time, the voluntary market is going to merge with the compliance markets across the world because more countries are placing mandatory limits on emissions. So the voluntary market is going to fade and coalesce into the compliance market.
And the last question to you, Benjamin, from Elliot. Do you think that $4 per hectare per year that is being advocated for to support the local communities in order to protect forests will encourage organized crime in relation to logging, or will reduce the forest-related crimes, for example?
So I think the question really means is there enough incentive for the local communities to buy into climate action, REDD+ projects? Now, to answer that question, the person that asked the question has already placed two things before us: the money that the profit from that stands to gain from logging, and the compensation from the climate projects, which is the disparity is so much, and we definitely need to look at that. We need to up our game in terms of compensating local communities. It's just you can't, if they stand to profit so much in the short term from logging, they would definitely rather continue logging. And these people, you have to remember, live at the subsistence level, so they think in short term.
Okay, thank you very much, Benjamin. I have a question to Rafael. Based on what you presented today, my idea was that actually what we see here, that activities of non-organized crime rather than big criminal groups who are operating in this region. Is my impression right, or can you clarify this a little bit more?
Sure, yeah. So thank you for your question. I think we can find some evidence of this organized activity, especially for the illegal gold extraction. And I think it has a lot to do with all the costs involved in this extraction, because we tend to think about it in terms of a small feature, but it's really done by like big business. They need machines for that. They need big machines for that. So yes, there is some evidence of it in terms of extraction, but when we go to the streets, what we see is a more diverse thing. It has less to do with organized crime. I mean, it seems to us, because this is the data we have access to. Right. We can't link people. We can't link them.
Yeah, that's
with
for
the data we have, especially because we only have data on a few of the offenders.
Okay, so, thank you very much. I have to wrap up from the secretary.
Sure.
I want to thank all the speakers and also those who attended our session for this very inspiring, interesting presentation. Thank you very much, and good luck with your further work. Bye-bye.